Welcome to Releasing Your Inner Dragon, where story creators talk story creation. Drake is an award-winning fantasy novelist and creative writing teacher. You can find his epic fantasy series, The Genesis Oblivion, on Kindle Vella. Marie runs a fantasy world-building channel called Just in Time Worlds, and her first book, The Hidden Blade, is available on Kindle Unlimited. We hope you enjoy this episode.
Hello and welcome to Releasing Your Inner Dragon with Drake and Marie. We're back off a hiatus. If you're listening to us on YouTube, make sure you subscribe. If you're on any of the podcast platforms, please add us to your list or subscribe or whatever you do on whatever podcast you're on. Very important. I think the most important thing is if you haven't already, join our mailing list. You never know what's going to happen in this crazy digital world, and platforms come and go or crazy things happen. So, and the link in the description is the links to our websites where you can join our mailing list. So if you haven't done that, please, join our mailing list. I think that's the most important for me, because then you can keep up with all the crazy stuff that I'm doing. Today, we're really going to be talking about time and how we divide our story up based off of time. And there's a couple things we're going to focus in on. One is like parallel time stories, where you're running two characters and we think that they're, because normally if we were in two POVs, we're thinking that they're at the same time, but they're not. So we will definitely be talking about stuff like Witcher and the first season of that TV show and why that was so terrible. But also, we're going to be talking about repeating. Like, a lot of authors think that it's a great idea to write this really amazing chapter from character A's perspective and then write the exact same scene from character B's perspective. And I get it. The author's like, oh, but it's a different, mindset, and there's so much new information, even though everything happens the exact same way. So those are the two things we're going to kind of focus in on, and we'll probably be talking about flashbacks as well, because that has to do with time. And it really is understanding where to start the story and how you're going to move the story and what you're going to do. What are some of your big pet peeves on this subject?
So for me, that retelling of a scene really irritates me. And it irritates me not just because we're covering the same ground. Even if I'm getting a lot of new content, it irritates me. Like, I'll give you an example. I read a piece where there is a character who's basically unconscious, who gets carried and wakes up in a hospital equivalent. Then the author goes back in the next chapter and retells that scene of the character being carried to the hospital by her other POV character.
Okay, now wait.
Yeah.
Because we talked about this before we recorded, but I missed something.
Yeah.
So are you saying that I'm in the head of a character and I'm watching him be carried, but he's unconscious?
So I'm not watching him be carried. I'm kind of flashing in and out of consciousness. So I'll like wake up, see, like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That makes a little, because like that would be a really weird POV break if it's like, so hi, you're in my head. I am unconscious, but I am being carried across this battlefield. And these are the things that I would see if my eyes were open and I was conscious. Like,
no, so you have these
how would you write that? Okay. All right.
You have these flash scenes, right?
All right.
And then she goes back and she fills in like the whole carrying scene. And she fills in then what happened in the hospital to get the character to the point of wake up. But I read the whole chapter, and I mean, it was well written. The information would have been interesting if I had not already known exactly where we're going to end up, the exact state we're going to end up in. And I'm not impatient for the actual story to continue. Because what effectively just happened in this chapter was 3,000 words of flashback. I understand that you think it's new content because it's a different POV character, but you have taken me into the past of the story. The story point is here. You have forced me to go into the past of the story and play up to the present again. And what I'm interested in is this story now.
In the future.
Yes.
If this writer had been a client of mine and it's something I picked up on, the question would be, and since you've read this, you should be able to answer this. What did I learn as a reader when I was the person being carried?
That chapter should have been cut, and it should have been the follow-up. The flashback chapter should have been the only one dealing with the situation.
And that's what I felt when you were describing this, because if it's just oh, I see this dead body, and oh, I
Mm.
see this thing go by, and oh, I'm so confused, and oh, now I'm waking up in a hospital. If there's no new piece of information that the audience is getting, and it's not new piece of information or not, this dead body that we've never seen before,
No.
this river that we've never crossed before,
No.
those are yes, sure, you could say, well, those are new information. No, they're not.
They're not.
Not from a story standpoint.
No.
That was when you were going through that. I was like, well, I can't even see why I would be in the head of that character.
So I'll tell you why I think they were in the head of the character, because why I think we were there, because when that character wakes up, she wakes up and she looks into the face of the man that she thinks murdered her father. So it's a very impactful emotional moment when she wakes up. But you can do that as the start of a chapter and still have the whole carrying scene from the awake character's perspective. Because what happened now was you made me go through an extremely boring chapter of unconsciousness to come to a massive hook where I'm like, oh. And then you flash back on me to tell, I'm like, no, no, don't do this. This just lost you a huge chunk of tension for no reason.
Which is sad.
So don't do that. Don't flash back and think that, you're going to give the reader new information and they're going to think it's cool.
The other question I would ask would be when the carrier, and when I'm in the head of the carrier and I'm running across that same whatever, what new information am I getting?
So there I'm actually getting some information because he's noticing things like the palace gates are still locked. Okay, that's important to know because he's aware of these other things as well. And then he's thinking about this hospital that he's running to, which has got supposedly has got healing magic, except he doesn't know if he believes in magic. So you've got this kind of that, like there's a lot of information there that could have been really impactful if I didn't know what's happening here.
Yeah.
And I have the same problem with split timelines. And people say, oh, but you're getting all of this character's backstory before they interact with us. Yes, you've just exactly hit the nail on the head. I know where the story is going to end, where that story is going to end. What I'm interested in is this story over here that's progressing. And now every other chapter, you're making me read what amounts to a flashback for perhaps 30,000 words.
It's the problem that I had with episodes 1, 2, and 3 of Star Wars. I know Anakin turns into Darth Vader.
Yeah.
The first problem that I had was
so I was on board for that because I loved the character of Darth Vader. I was like, maybe it'll be interesting to watch him for. Maybe. Yeah. Then the actual episodes happened.
Right. Yeah. But no, I mean, even when they announced that they were doing it, that was my first problem. It's sort of like, now this is much more tongue in cheek, but it's sort of like the Titanic. Like, why am I going to watch this movie? I know the boat sinks, but the story wasn't about the boat sinking.
No.
The difference, and that's the difference. The story of the first 3 books are about Anakin becoming Darth Vader, which we had already gotten a lot of his history and everything else. So you're kind of rehashing it. Yeah. Titanic had nothing to do with the boat sinking. So yes, you could say, why am I watching this? Because we know that. And that's why I said I'm doing tongue in cheek with that one, because it was not about that.
And all of the Titanic movies that they made that was about the boat sinking tanked. Right. They all tanked because everybody knows the Titanic sinks. The Witcher, we spoke about The Witcher. So let's talk about The Witcher because this is the most recent, most topical example of this. I watched The Witcher season 2 because I got invested in the world and the characters, which is good for The Witcher. But when I realized that their timelines are split and that I'm watching what amounts to a flashback, I was quite annoyed. It took me a couple of weeks to decide to actually continue the series and finish it because I was quite annoyed at this flashback, nonsense.
And they did even worse. They did even more grievous damage because not only did they do, at the end of season 1, and we're going to spoil some things here. So if you want to skip this, and I'm not going to spoil anything that's serious. But the big thing is the promise, going back to last episode, the promise that is made is that this girl is on the run. She's being hunted, and the Witcher is supposed to be taking care of her. And so he's hunting her to save her while everyone else is hunting her to kill her. And there's this farm that they're going to end up at, and they do in the last episode, and at the end of the last episode. The problem is that right there, you learn that when the Witcher reaches this farm, which they've both been heading toward, she was there 10 years ago. The Witcher's 10 years late. And you're watching all these scenes as they play out as if they're playing out simultaneously. They don't do anything to hint that the two timelines are off kilter until and I'm sure somebody's like, hee, what a clever thing. No, it's not clever. It's confusing. And it because they also did worse things, because like in one of the first episodes, it might have been the first episode, you're watching this guy who takes an arrow to the eye and he's dead.
Yes.
And then like 2 or 3 episodes later, you're watching this guy, the same guy, courting this woman. And so by that point, I hadn't figured out that there's different timelines going on, because there was actually more than just the two. There were 3 or 4 different timelines going on, all different, all at different times. But I was like, wait, did they do the crappy thing of hiring the same actor to play a different character part that they like? That's weird. And then I was like, or is this a twin thing? Like, I couldn't figure it out until really later. And wasn't even in that episode. Much later, I was like, you know what? That happened before he took the arrow to the eye. But they don't set it up. They don't give you any information at all. And so it was very frustrating and it was bad. And it was so bad that, like I said, season 1 ends with the Witcher showing up at the farm and finding out he's 10 years late. Season 2 starts with them both together. He found her. And the show literally is sort of like, what are you talking about? No, they were both on the farm together. That's the way we ended it. They both ended up on the farm together. We didn't do any time thing. And then what was hilarious is about halfway through the thing, there was this opportunity that they literally did a joke about how they screwed up the timeline in the first season. In the show, 2 of the characters, this thing happens and they joke about, oh yeah, no, we screwed that up. We're not doing that now. It was very meta and very funny. But they did it in this organic way that also fit with the world and the characters. So they weren't talking about the fact that they're in a show. It was much different than that. It was brilliant. But it was this great kind of, hey, fans, we messed up.
We're sorry.
and we're not going to do that again. Stay with us because we fixed it. And we're willing to take that hit. We're willing to say we were wrong.
That part that you were talking about where he got shot in the eye, and then you like he's alive. But that's I know the dude's dead. I'm watching the plod towards his death. I know he's dead. I know where he dies. Why are you making me care?
I was going to talk about this later, but I'm going to talk about it now. But I do want to go back to there's another grievous mistake in that death. It's why I pretty much will turn off a movie if it starts with, and then the hero gets shot 18 hours earlier. I'm done. I'm literally done. I'm out. I actually didn't watch Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. after, I think it's the 2nd episode or the 3rd episode. I didn't watch it until the entire season, or because I think they had 5 or 6 or 7 years of it. This episode made me so angry that it was several years after the show had ended before I went back and started watching it again. And it's either the 2nd or the 3rd episode. The episode starts, and this is why it was so infuriating to me. John Wick starts with 18 hours earlier, which sucks. It's the black sedan pulls up and hits the wall. He gets out. He's all bloody, and he looks at a picture of his wife. And then 18 hours earlier, like, it's stupid. Why do I need to know that? So the way this episode started with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. was, you had already been introduced to their plane, the agent's plane, and that you're on the outside. The plane is flying along. The side blows out, and several people are sucked out and die. And then it says 18 hours earlier.
Yes.
Okay. So now I know that the plane's going to blow up or, get damaged. And I know it's going to be, so you've already ruined that. That's really what you're doing, is you're ruining the suspense for me. You're ruining that. But what was so infuriating and what made me stop watching it and not watch it for like 8 years is that when we finally get to that point and they're in the plane and they've been taken hostage and they're back in the prison area of the plane, one of the characters says, I know how we can get out of this, but you're not going to like it. And if they had ended it there, I would have been disappointed, but not angry, just disappointed. But then in front of me to insult me like I'm an idiot, he leans over and goes, I already know what your plan is. You showed it to me. Why am I watching you not tell me? Because you're acting like you're whispering it to the other characters. I was so mad. If I was at a theater, I'd have walked out.
Yeah.
I'm like, that is the dumbest piece of writing. So one of the internet memes is the dumbest piece of writing ever written is from the old Spider-Man television show. And Spider-Man is in the room, and an exact, him, the same actor in the Spider-Man suit walks in, and the evil one that walked in says, yes, you're Spider-Man and I'm Spider-Man and this is a gun. And so the internet calls that the worst piece of dialogue ever written.
I mean, that's some pretty bad dialogue.
Oh my God. Like, talk about, as you know, yes, you're Spider-Man and I'm Spider-Man and this is a gun. like it's just hilarious. But I actually think that moment, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., when you had the character whisper the fact that they were going to end up blowing up the side of the plane in front of me, the audience that already knows that the side of the plane is getting blown out, so whatever they're going to do is going to lead to that. It was so insulting and so infuriating. Again, probably 7-8 years later before I even watched it again.
And that's the thing that people don't understand with flashbacks, is they think the flashback is going to make the reader more invested in the character.
Before we get into that, because that's the next part of this, let me go back to The Witcher and the guy with the arrow in his eye. One of the things that is a huge, grievous mistake of that, writers, especially new writers, but really even professional writers, do this all the time. And I don't understand why. I can't, like, I don't do this. And I don't think I ever did it. Even when I wrote The Warlord's Dust when I was 12, I don't think I did this, because it's just so stupid to me to not understand that the reader is getting this information for the first time. They don't know anything about your characters, and you, the writer, are already in love with everybody.
Yes.
So when you kill that guy in that first episode, I don't know him. I don't care. It makes no impact on me whatsoever. Later, when we get to see him courting the woman that screamed when he died, and you get their relationship and you get that built and you actually care, kill him after that, because now I actually give a crap. And now I'm with the girl who's going to go, no, what are you killing him beforehand? He's just a stranger. It's so dumb.
But now I know as the viewer or the reader, I know that dude's going to die.
Right.
I've seen it.
And now you care less for their romance.
Now I don't care about their romance.
Right.
I don't because I know this dude's going to die. I am already uninvested in him. Not I know he's going to die because it's a trope. Not I know he's going to die because I'm like, oh, it's the mentor character. The mentor is going to die. No. I know he's going to die because you showed me he's going to die.
It's the same thing about the show me the end of the television episode and then say 18 hours earlier. It's the same exact thing. It does nothing for you. It actually hurts your story. Don't do that. It is the dumbest thing to do. It's also the reason why you should not start with a dream. Now, this thing I'm going to drop in a couple weeks, Snurse Magic Magic Fairy Tale. And by the way, I want to do a plug. You can buy it, and we're going to run some promotions. Like the first 250 people that buy it off of my website is going to get we're doing a limited number of up to 1 to 250. So you'll get one of the hand numbered things by me and autographed by me and all this other stuff. You can buy it from Amazon. It's going to be available everywhere. I'm also giving away. My goal is to give away over 30,000 free digital copies. So you don't have to buy it. I would appreciate it if you buy it. It is, a great story, but I am giving away for free as well. So, stay tuned for that. And again, join my mailing list at starvingwriterstudio.com so you can get notified of how we're doing the giveaways and all of that. But anyway, it's one of the reasons why the industry and me, everybody, anybody worth their weight in salt is going to agree. Don't start your book off with a dream. Even though Snurse starts with a dream, the reason is not the dream. Starting a story in a dream is not the problem. It's that 99.9% of everybody that does it wrong. And it's the exact same reason of the guy getting the arrow in the eye. So what most of you do, and I'm using the proverbial you, not you, the listener, most of them they use the dream to show what the character fears losing the most. So like, it'll be a dream where my house is on fire and I'm trying to save my wife and kids, but I don't, and they die and I watch them burn to death. And so the writer already knows the story and already loves this character and loves the connection between him and his wife and his kids. And so then what you're going to do is you're going to start building that relationship. I, the reader, don't. He's a stranger. I don't care that his wife and kids die. I mean, it's, everybody cares about that, but I'm not emotionally invested.
Yeah.
It is just a statistic to me at that point. So you, the writer, do this because you're like, oh, look how clever I am. I'm giving the reader what the character's most afraid of losing, so they have that information going forward. But you can't take that from them before I care about it, because then I don't care. And now you've literally weakened your story. And that's the reason why you don't do that. And I didn't do that in Snurse. It does start in a dream, but it starts very different. The dream has completely different reasons for it. It's a shortcut to doing some massively important story-based things that I don't have to waste time later. Yeah. But I do not do the whole, this is what Snurse is going to lose. And so that you now know his biggest fear, so that we can move on. And then I will build his love for that and then take it away from him. Like, no.
Because that exactly, now I know what's going to happen.
Right.
And all it is a plot towards it. And you're disinvesting me in the relationship, in the character, in everything about it.
You've just weakened every aspect of it. And I get the draw to it. I do understand where people are like, oh, but if they know about what they fear the most, then they'll really care about it. Build the care first. And now we can get into flashbacks, but I just really want to go down that path.
So the thing is, like, people who do split timelines, people who do like The Witcher and so on, I actually got into kind of a little bit of an argument with somebody who's doing a split timeline. I was like, don't do this. I just lost interest in your story the moment I realized that this is a split timeline. And the author said, but it's cool because it's like watching a train wreck. I'm like, yeah, but I don't watch train wrecks. There are people who do, and I'm sure there will be an audience for it. But I don't like split timelines, because the story that I'm interested in is the story that is happening. And with a split timeline, you are telling me a story that happened in the past of the story that I'm interested in. You're drawing me out of this story to tell me this story. And at the same time, this story has already told me where this story is going to end. Where is my tension?
Right. And there's ways to do it correctly by avoiding those mistakes. I think the biggest problem with The Witcher is you feel lied to.
Yes.
Because they don't give you like if first of all it was just bad. They made a lot of mistakes as far as mixing up the time. But they could have fixed it with just it's a crappy little plot device, but just putting the date and then putting the date and then putting the date at the beginning of every scene. And it's crappy. I get it. But again, what you did was crappy. So that at least would give me a heads up.
Yeah.
It would be definitely a Band-Aid on the dam that has popped the hole. It's not going to save the world, but it would at least help to slow the damage, I guess.
You know what this author did that really like annoyed me and disinvested me was there had been no signs until you reached a certain critical chapter. And then what happens in that critical chapter, now the motivation of the one character, the motivation of the character who's in the present is that her father has died. Her father has died in the city and she's trying to figure out who murdered him. And there's been no signs that the other POV is in the past until that POV is now talking to this girl's father and making him promises. And you're just like, I at least was just like, are you kidding me? I'm 30,000 words into this book, and now you're telling me that this POV is not in the present. Moreover, this POV probably had something to do with this dude's death. So I'm following the bad guy.
And we're not saying don't do this stuff. We're just saying understand the pitfalls of doing this stuff and avoid them. Like, why did I start Nurse with a Dream? Well, I understand why we don't start things in a dream. And so I'm going to avoid those. And it absolutely works. And it just works. Or at least I think it works. Again, get a free copy and review it. That's what you need to do. And then you can tell me if you think think it worked. Because like when you're explaining that with the whole dad's death and all this, I was going through some scenarios of like, what would I do? How would I do that? And I was like, you know what? I could probably do that. I would have to pay attention to this and do this and all this other stuff. I don't think that I would do it. And again, I'd have to get into the plotting and into the weeds and all that. But my knee-jerk reaction right now is the reader would know that you were back in time.
Yes.
In that first chapter of the person back in time, I would make sure they know.
Because then at least the reader understands. And it's not like a surprise. But because I was so deep into it, and I was like, now you're telling me it's all a flashback? Really? Because now I feel like it's all a freaking dream. I feel lied to.
So, and that goes back to the last episode we talked about with promises.
Yep.
And these are all things you have to kind of keep in mind. And yeah, so in my writers group last night, one of my writers wanted to do a formatting thing that's not standard formatting. And so, and we've talked about this on this podcast, but I said, hey, so really it's done this way. And she goes, I don't like that. I don't like that way. I'm gonna do it this way. I'm like, that's fine. You can break standard formatting. But remember, if you're going to break it, you're going to piss people off. But this person did not want to italicize inner monologue. So you're in a paragraph of narration and it just, the last sentence will be inner monologue. They keep it to where they're not doing, at least so far from what I've seen, they're not doing I. So normally, dialogue in third person, because the story's in third person. So dialogue in third person is written in first person. It's just, and so inner monologue is just dialogue in the head. And so what I tried to explain to her is the reason why we do that is readers, when you're reading, read these things differently in their mind. So when I'm reading narration, it's narration. Yeah, it's just some narrator that's doing this. And even in limited, which is what I write, it still feels like narration. When you get to a piece of quoted dialogue, you still read it, but in your mind, it feels like it's being actually voiced. And when you hit that inner monologue that's italicized, you know that it is in the character's head and you read it that way. So with her not italicizing any of this stuff, I'm still going to read it as narration. I'm not going to read it as inner monologue.
I agree with you. And I kind of agree with her depending on how she phrased it. Because, for example, I don't italicize my equivalent of inner monologue, but I never put my inner monologue in first person. And I never do it in the present tense.
Then it's not inner monologue.
No, I know, but it is the equivalent of inner monologue for free and direct.
Certainly.
Right? And that you don't have to italicize.
Right. Because it's still just narration. That's all you're doing.
Yes, it's narration of the inner thoughts.
Right. You're trying to get the reader a little more in depth into the character. Yes. The power of inner monologue is when you hit it, you're inside the mind of the character. Yes. So there's a much more intimate connection with it. The reason why, I'm a huge inner monologue user. I use it every page. Yeah. There's almost no page of anything I've ever written that doesn't have inner monologue, because I love this ability to slip the reader even deeper inside the character, give them an even more intimate moment with that character, and so and that's what she was trying to do. So she wasn't doing what you were doing. She was actually trying to slip them in deeper, but because it's written as narration, I'm not gonna slip in. I'm gonna read it as narration. It's on the outside, and I'm just as far away from the character as I was in the last line, which was narration. So that's what I was trying to explain to her. And again, you make your own calls. Yeah. I'm only here to give you advice and suggestions and everything like that. I never dictate. You have to do your own thing. And that's what I told her, because she was like, well, I think I'm going to do. I'm like, great. I'm just here to tell you my thoughts and opinions and make sure you understand. Because most writers, most new writers, they truly feel that it's about them. I like it like this. I don't care what you like, because you're not the reader of this. You're going to try to get dozens, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people to read it. They're the people that matter. Those are the people that you need to be catering to, not you. So I don't care that you like that formatting. That doesn't mean anything. So that's all I was trying to do. And so this is kind of going back to the same thing. When you're doing these weird time shifts or flashbacks, or the same thing with we talked about it earlier about doing the same exact scene from two different characters' perspectives. The reason why you're doing that is because you think it's cool. No one else is going to think it's cool.
You love all the characters.
I rage against head hopping. And every time I find an author that's head hopping, it's always the same reason. No one has ever given me a different reason for head hopping. And the reason is always, well, I love every one of my characters. And I think if I give, in every paragraph, if I give you insights into their thinking, all the readers are going to love every one of my characters too. No, the readers can never like that many characters. You like the main character, maybe a few other characters, but it's about the story. So your bartender who says that'll be 3 copper, I don't want to be in his head. I don't got time to be in his head. I don't give a crap about him. We're never going to see him again. Why am I in his head where he's going, oh, look at the POV character. I think, they look kind of cool or whatever. I don't care what you think about the POV character. Like, just do your job and shut your mouth. Like, you're a tertiary character. But that's what they're doing. They're like, but oh no, I love the bartender. And I've actually created his entire backstory. I mean, it's not in the book. No, the readers get it, but I know it. And it's like, then I'm never going to care. So it's the same thing.
The people I've met here or there who write in omniscient, and I'm like, why are you writing in omniscient? Oh, so that I can give you everybody's inner thoughts. I'm like,
that's not omniscient. That's head hopping. Again, I talked about business in the last episode. We are business people and artists. We do our art and we love our art, and we're definitely, the artist. But as an author, you have to have the ability to put on a business hat. And a lot of these decisions that you make, these creative decisions, can very drastically impact the business side of what you're trying to do. Yeah. And so if you don't want to have 100 different pen names, because every time you put out a book, you get a bunch of 1 stars and nobody will ever buy you again, you need to think about this in that light. You need to think about the fact that it's like, hey, why does nobody ever do this? Well, it's because it crashes and burns the couple times that people have done it. Well, maybe I shouldn't do that then, even if I think it's cool. And this is where it comes down to beta readers and, going to writers groups and listen to podcasts like this, where people are willing to be unfiltered. I mean, I think it's one of the reasons why people gravitate to my teaching, because I don't care. Everything I say is stuff that I wish somebody had told me 20 years ago. But most people won't, just because it's controversial, and people will get mad at me and send me hate mail. It's like, how like I badmouth Vox Machina last episode, like, how dare you? That's one of my favorite shows. I'm like, great, I'm happy you like it. It wasn't for me, and it wasn't for me because of the things that I said.
I posted on Reddit that I didn't like in Order of the Phoenix, where Harry Potter goes off to the Ministry of Magic, because he had that mirror with which he could have communicated with Sirius. And that mirror felt like a Chekhov's gun. I had this dude on Reddit go off about, how can you say that he was acting like a teenage boy? It was perfect. I'm like, okay, dude, that's fine. That's your opinion.
It worked for you.
It didn't work for me. That's why it's my opinion and not your opinion. And then his next response was like, it's not opinion, it's fact. It's how people react. I'm like, my man.
Well, that's the world we live in. We live in a world where opinions have become facts, and facts are conspiracy theories.
Yeah. So please understand that when I say something about a piece of art content, it is my opinion. It might or might not be your opinion. If it's your exact opinion, that's really weird, and don't tell me about it.
But it's the same thing with all the advice we give for everything.
Yes.
If we're saying don't do this and you're like, but I'm doing that, great, do it. We're just saying, think about it, get other people's opinions. Don't be a vacuum, which so many, even indie authors, they're a vacuum. They sit in their room, they write their story. No one ever reads it until it gets published. That is dangerous. That's a terrifying thing. I mean, that's why I have like 50 beta readers, because I want a giant pool of people who I can get feedback on and make sure that when I put it out there, all the time and effort and money that I've spent to build the Drake brand doesn't, because, you know, we're only as good as our last product.
Yeah.
Again, I run off of the 8 out of 10 rule.
Same, because, you know, maybe I am the exception who doesn't like it, and 9 other people like it.
That's why I go 8 out of 10.
Yeah.
8 out of 10 is 4 out of 5 stars. So if I put it out to 50 beta readers and 40 of them are like, oh my God, this is awesome. I love this. I love this. I love this. And 10 of them are like, I didn't like it.
Yeah.
Now, I am a perfectionist, so I will try to tweak it to keep the 40, but also catch a few more of the, you know, so I do try to move it further.
Sure. But be aware that you're never going to like, not everyone is ever going to like everything.
Right.
Yeah.
But if it's 39 liked it and 11 didn't, then I have to rework it. Yes. Because I didn't get to my 8 out of 10. And that's going to put me below 4 out of 5 stars. It's when you're doing this. And we haven't talked about flashbacks yet. And we only got maybe 10 more minutes. And I do want to talk about flashbacks.
All right. So hit us. Flashbacks.
You're going to do, if you're doing a POV that can support it, like first person doesn't really support flashbacks. People do them all the time, but it's dumb. You should not write flashbacks in first person, because it breaks the illusion of what the power of first person is bringing to the table. So if you're in third person and you're doing flashbacks, which we all do because you have to do it occasionally. The big thing about flashbacks that my cautionary tale is, if you're doing too many, it's because you started in the wrong spot of your story. So that's really what you have to weigh yourself on. Also,
if you do it too early. If you have to flashback in your first chapter, you have started your story in the wrong place.
Every time.
Without exception. If you flashback in the first chapter, you have started in the wrong place.
Right.
100%.
Again, just like we've been talking about, one of the things is perception, reader perception. When I go into a flashback, one of the things that you've lost of me is some of the tension on, will this character survive? Yes, they will, because I've already seen them in the future thinking about this moment in time. So, you know, if you're doing something like that where you're flashbacking in the first chapter, why don't you make the first chapter that scene? If that scene is so important, again, I have to care about the character. So you can't just throw me into a death scene because I don't care about anything yet. So there's a lot of balancing acts here. There's a lot of things you have to think about. But my big cautionary tale for flashbacks is if you just find yourself doing a ton of them, it's because you probably started the story in the wrong spot, that you should have started earlier. And then also, I guess the second thing would be just to really make sure that flashback must happen. Most people feel that I'm a very tight writer. Create my stories with the intent that they are a Jenga tower on their last move. You pull any piece, you pull any scene out of my story, it no longer works. Every scene has been cut down. And we're still talking about, I'm writing 180,000 word novels. So it's not like I'm not wordy, but every scene matters. And if you cut one, it breaks the entire story. And so a lot of flashbacks that I've read in my career are like, you know, this is cool. I like getting it. That's awesome. But it doesn't impact the story. If I didn't get this, I would not have missed. It's like if I don't get the backstory of the bartender who says 3 coppers, I'm not going to miss it. It's that same thing. You know, you've got to really weigh out, one, are you doing too many? But 2, are you just doing a flashback because you've created this backstory for the character and you're all excited about it, but it doesn't really impact the story that I'm in and where it's going.
And especially, like, maybe it impacted the story of the past. Maybe it impacted how the characters got here. But does it impact the overcome? Because if how they got here is not going to be relevant to the overcome, then cut. Cut the flashback.
And you're also missing opportunities maybe to make some more money. So one of the things that I love about the first book of the Genesis saga is there's these 2 characters that you meet, a POV and a secondary character. And the secondary character is just his manservant. I mean, they're very close friends. So it's not like a, you know, relationship just employer and employee. You get that they've been together for decades. You get that they very much care for each other in a very deep and personal way. They're willing to die for each other. You get all this stuff, but I never, ever during the Genesis give you their backstory, ever. No flashbacks. And I absolutely could have. But then I wrote a novella that was released separately of the time when they met. And it's a fantastic story. And it is something that I wanted to share with the audience. But giving it a backstory, I would lose a lot of the nuances of it. I had created all this stuff. Now, I didn't write that backstory piece until the second book was already out. So we're talking 4 years later. The only reason why I even wrote it was because I had an anthology that was like, we really want you to write something new for us. We'll pay you for this thing. And we want it to be set. Can you set it in the Genesis world? And I was like, well, I got all this backstory stuff. I mean, this story between these two characters and how they met is freaking amazing. Let me do that. And so I wrote a 23,000 word story on that. But never is it in as a backstory, because again, it doesn't impact the story. It is awesome how they met. It is so, like, the craziest thing is the manservant guy in the story, you realize is actually royalty.
Yeah.
He's like this massively powerful dude 20 years ago. How did he end up as a manservant for another dude? Like, just working, salt of the earth. How do you go from being basically a prince to this? And so, I love the story that I created for their backstory. You never even get a hint that he's royalty or ex-royalty.
Much as we love character development in epic fantasy, and we do, like, epic fantasy readers love character development, no doubt about it. But much as we love it, there is character development, which is what happens in the story because of the things that happen to the characters as I watch them happen. And then there's all the backstory that happened before I met the character, which I don't want to wade through because I am invested in the character now, the things happening to them now. And I don't want to be taken out and go back in time.
Unless, if I don't have this piece of backstory information, I won't understand why they've made the decisions that they're making that is going to impact the outcome of this story.
Yes.
So, like, depending on the Batman story, I may need to understand why Batman chose the bat as his icon. I may need to go back when he was an 8-year-old and fall in the well and get attacked by bats. And I may need that to totally appreciate this moment that he's in as an adult. But if I don't, then I don't. It's just backstory that just stays in the backstory drawer.
Exactly. And that, to me, is the big deal, is the big difference here. Is like, if your flashback is going to be important to the outcome of the story, this story, absolutely. But otherwise, no.
This goes back to what we talked about in the last episode. If you are in that indie publishing realm, there is no gatekeeper. So you have to be even more crucial on yourself. And that's, I think, where a lot of indie publisher or indie authors miss. They don't hold themselves accountable. Somebody will tell them, hey, you really should, if you were to just go through and italicize these, they're already written as inner monologue. It would take the reader just one step deeper. A lot of indie will be like, nope, I don't like italicized. I'm never going to use italicized. Screw that. Like, okay, your call. There's no boss for you. Just giving you advice, just opinion. Yeah, she's going to give me hell for this. She's actually, I've never brought her up on this because she is a fantastic writer. And yes, I am saying that to save my ass for next time she's hit my writer's group. No, she really is. She really is an amazing. She's been with me for 5 or 6 years now. She started coming to my classes and all that. And I've watched her just leaps and bounds improve. And again, this, I say this all the time. It's about time and effort. If you really take this serious and you really push yourself, you can become a really, really good writer. It just takes years. The
thing for me, like, for example, why I took the decision not to use inner monologue is because I knew I would have telepathy in the story.
It's hard. It's very hard.
And so I'm going to have full-blown telepathy with double quotes and italics, but the reader's really going to see the italics. So now if I start mixing in actual inner monologue, I'm going to have a problem.
And again, that's you making a decision because of reasons that you feel are going to make the story better for the reader. So, and that's all I'm asking. When I give these pieces of advice, I just always ask, Don't put yourself first.
Put the reader first. So I make sure that I have those inner thoughts, but I have them in a narrative style, not in an inner monologue style.
What are your final thoughts on alternate timelines, flashbacks, parallel time stories?
If you're going to do anything like that, an example that, from Joel Rosenberg is he had a thing where right at the end, there's this uber powerful wizard that talks to each character individually, right at the end of the book. And that kind of worked because each character was individual. But it's still, even there, made me a little impatient because I could see what was happening and it's essentially all the same time. And I want the story to progress.
I have this, the same thing in Mortals and Deities where I do that. And it's 4 completely different conversations. And I stand by it. I've had a huge amount of people that bitch about it, but a couple people are like, it's the same thing. I'm like, it's 4 completely different conversations. It's not the same thing.
It is completely different, but because the story isn't progressing from the reader's perspective, it can be a little bit impatient. You can get a bit impatient with it. So if you are going to cover the same ground with multiple POVs, seriously think about what you're doing. Even if you're giving new content, bear in mind that the reader's going, yes, but I know where the story is. I want the story to progress. If you are going to do split time POVs, please don't surprise your reader with it because they're going to feel cheated and lied to.
Unless the payoff, because I can think of some times where like it could work, but the payoff has to be so freaking amazing that they forgive you for what you've done.
The payoff has to be so good that I forgive you for lying to me.
Right.
For however many words you've lied to me, I must forgive you because it was so cool.
Right. You can earn it.
Yeah, but then you've got to earn it. If you're doing split times, I would rather say, like, let the reader know right up front, or make sure the payoff is that amazing. One of these 2 things. But don't let me find out halfway through without a payoff. Flashbacks, if they're in your first chapter, you've started your story in the wrong spot. If you have them, really, really think about whether they are relevant to the outcome of your story. And if they're not, cut them. And on that note, we will see you soon for another episode of Releasing Your Inner Dragon.
Bye.
Hi guys, this is Marie from Releasing Your Inner Dragon, and I hope you're enjoying the podcast. If you're interested in more content on fantasy world building, head over to YouTube and look up Just in Time Worlds. I release tons of content there. If you'd like to check out my book, The Hidden Blade by Marie M. Mullaney, it is available as an ebook, audiobook, and print book on Amazon. Thanks for listening and see you soon.
Hey guys, Drake here. Thank you so much for listening to Releasing Your Inner Dragon podcast. I hope you're getting a ton of information and maybe even some nuggets of gold that you can take into your own writing to help you on your journey of story creation. A couple things I want to throw at you. First of all, for the first time in years, I am opening myself up to being a private mentor again. If you would like for me to work with you to improve your writing right now, reach out to me. You can either go to my website, maxwellalexanderdrake.com, and send me a contact form, or just email me at author@maxadrake.com. Also, as many of you may know, I've been out of the novel game for quite a few years. I was the lead fiction writer for EverQuest Next from Sony. I've been in the movie and TV industry for a few years now, but I am excited to say I'm back into the novel game. I've actually been working on a novel for a little while now, and I'm going to start dropping it on Amazon's Zavella. So if you're on that platform, look me up, Maxwell Alexander Drake. Thank you again for listening, and as always, keep writing.